The radioactive wastewater from Fukushima is being discharged into the ocean. This measure of Japan has caused a lot of criticism, and we clarify in this video how dangerous it really is to just dump the water into the ocean at the site of this famous nuclear disaster. You don't want to miss this, so be sure to stay tuned until the end because this video will make you shine. Feel free to leave a thumbs up and a comment, because that's how we get the YouTube algorithm to display this important topic to even more people. Thanks a lot guys and welcome. Most of you will remember that on March 11, 2011, a devastating magnitude 9 earthquake struck the Japanese islands. This quake triggered a terrible tsunami that caused massive destruction and hit the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. This was the beginning of one of the worst nuclear disasters in history. The earthquake and tsunami caused severe damage to the nuclear power plant's reactors. The power plant safety systems failed, causing core meltdowns and hydrogen explosions in several reactors. This in turn led to the release of radioactive substances into the environment. Thousands of people were evacuated, entire cities became temporarily uninhabitable, and there was a significant release of radioactive material into the atmosphere and the sea. Very tragic, but without wanting to minimize the consequences, in my view, serious reporting on this also includes clarifying misinformation about the number of fatalities. In Germany, many politicians really did fake news on this. To date, the number of people who died as a result of the Fukushima nuclear disaster, that is, as a result of the impact of radioactivity, is 1. Tragic enough, but ask yourself if this was correctly conveyed by the reporting in your country. I mean no. Here, tsunami deaths were often made into nuclear deaths, and I don't think that's right. That's just by the way. But the other consequences were massive, of course. Agricultural land was contaminated, food was contaminated, and radiation endangered the health of those who lived near the site of the disaster. In the years that followed, extensive cleanup efforts were undertaken to contain the radiation and rehabilitate the region. And of course, radiation naturally decreases over time. As things stand now, there is hardly any significant radiation in the vicinity of Fukushima on a truly threatening scale. On this map here, we see the current readings of radiation throughout Japan. In the Fukushima area, of course, it's higher than in the rest of the country, but when we look at the levels, we see that there is no real health threat. We see maximum values of radiation exposure here of 6 to 7,000 nanosievert per hour, higher than the normal background exposure, but still a low value, and then at only a short distance from the power plant the radiation decreases quite rapidly. But nevertheless, even now, almost 12 years after the accident, problems continue to arise. Since 2011, contaminated water has accumulated there that was produced daily in the power plant. That's because water was needed to cool the damaged reactors, and groundwater that became contaminated as it permeated the site had to be pumped out and stored. Over 1,000 tanks were constructed on site to store over 1 million tons of radioactive water. Now what was to be done with this water? Storing and managing the water in large tanks on site has become a challenge because the volume of water has now grown so much that critical capacity limits have been reached. So that begs the urgent question, where to put the Fukushima water? Into the flower bed? Or a big water fight? In order to find a solution for this, to resolve this in the long term, so that in a few years you are faced with the same problem, the Japanese government had pragmatically decided to simply discharge the treated water into the ocean. And I'm sure the reaction of many of you was something like this. Dumping radioactive water into the ocean?
Are they completely stupid? Greta, do something.
But take it easy. Tokyo Electric Power Company, or TEPCO, the company that operates Fukushima, has filtered the treated water through an advanced treatment system called ALPS to remove most radioactive elements, such as cobalt-60, strontium-90 and cesium-137. However, tritium, a radioactive form of hydrogen, remains. That's because it's difficult to separate from water. Why? Here's a little chemistry lesson. When one of the hydrogen atoms in water is replaced by tritium, radioactive tritiated water is formed. Tritiated water is chemically identical to normal water, which makes its separation from wastewater expensive, energy-intensive, and time-consuming. And in 2020, They had already tested whether current tritium separation technologies would be able to handle the volumes of water needed here, and the answer was so translated, no. So we can't get rid of the tritium in the Fukushima water. Is that a bad thing? No, because compared to other radioactive elements, tritium is relatively harmless and its existence as tritiated water greatly reduces its environmental impact. Chemically identical to normal water, tritiated water passes through normal water just like that and does not accumulate much as a result. Tritiated water hardly accumulates in the bodies of animals and has what is called a bioaccumulation factor of about 1. In comparison, radioactive cesium-137, for example, has an accumulation factor of about 100 as it gradually accumulates in the food chain. So imagine you are one of those puffer fish off the coast of Fukushima and you are happy that no Japanese master chefs have gotten their hands on you yet. Because of the bioaccumulation factor of 1, you cannot absorb more tritium in a puffer fish body than is in the surrounding water. And, of course, there is virtually no additional tritium in the surrounding water because the Fukushima wastewater is diluted almost beyond recognition given the masses of ocean water. So all the puffer fish can now breathe a sigh of relief. But there I hear some of you screaming indignantly.
I don't believe you, that's dangerous. That's radioactive.
Radioactive is a good keyword, because the ocean itself is quite radioactive by nature. Take a look at this exciting graphic here. We see here the amount of radioactive activity due to various nuclear accidents, and the radioactive activity of substances that are bound up in the ocean anyway. The unit petabequel is a unit of measurement for the activity of radioactive substances. 1 becquerel is used for the number of radioactive decays per second and 1 petabequerel is equal to 10 to the power of 15 becquerels. So, now we see that Fukushima is tiny on the graph and the graph even shows all the releases from the Fukushima accident from day 1, not just the heavily filtered and diluted tritium that is left over, which by the way has a total of only about 1 petabequerel. Potassium-40, naturally bound in the ocean, on the other hand, is responsible for a whopping 15 million petabequerels. Or to put it another way, the radioactive activity of the tritiated water from Fukushima now released into the ocean is equivalent to 1/15 millionth of the natural radioactivity in the ocean due to potassium-40 alone. So anyone who now considers it irresponsible to release this water into the ocean would consequently have to be afraid after a day of swimming at the beach that it is now contaminated with radioactivity.
Looking good. How's yours?
Because the data is so clear, the International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA, at the request of the Japanese government, conducted a safety assessment for this plan and declared it to be feasible without hesitation. The maximum estimated radioactive dose from the released water from Fukushima is estimated in this assessment to be 3.9 microsievert per year. This is a fraction of the average 2,400 microsievert of natural radiation that people simply receive each year. From my point of view, the facts are absolutely clear. The Fukushima water can easily be released into the Moor, and all arguments against it do not seem to me to be very scientifically sound, but rather emotional in nature. But feel free to write me your assessment in the comments. Is it right that the Fukushima water is simply released into the ocean? If not, why not? I ask you to provide factual, scientific arguments. When it comes to this topic, often comments like,
I am very disappointed in you. Does the nuclear lobby pay you?
But what should you do with that? That's not a factual discussion. So let's discuss, but with numbers, data, and facts. Something else that is quite undiscussable, however, is the fact that most viewers have not yet subscribed. But this is absolutely free and you won't miss any galactic videos anymore. And if you want to know if we're in for an ice age, be sure to click on the video shown. Otherwise I would say see you in the next video. Take care guys.